to BHookedCrochet.com. I'm your host Brittany. In this video I'm going to talk about how to cross stitch on crochet. Now I'm going to be using a free pattern that's available at BHookedCrochet.com. It's a pattern for the Valentine Goody Bag. You can find the link to that pattern in the description below. You can also find the diagram that we'll be using on that page as well. Cross-stitching on crochet is a very cool way to blend two fiber art techniques that have been used for many years. You're going to need a few supplies in order to start cross-stitching on your crochet, but probably not anything you don't already have. The most important thing you're going to need is a diagram. Now you can actually use a cross-stitch diagram, or you can draw one of your own like I've done here. If you do want to draw your own, you'll just need a sheet of graph paper. That makes your life a little bit easier to keep the blocks straight. And you'll just know that each block in the graph represents one stitch. You're also going to need one of your darning needles and some of your yarn. And then what we need is a plain piece of fabric that you have crocheted using single crochets. Now you can also do this on Tunisian crochet using the simple stitch, so if you'd prefer that. For this particular swatch I have used the single crochet. Now this little project that you see here, this is the Valentine Goody Bag. It's available at BHookedCrochet.com. It's a free pattern. I'm going to be demonstrating using this piece of fabric here, this little swatch. So as you can see, I've cross-stitched this design on the front, and now we're going to be cross-stitching the same design on the back of the bag. Now I mentioned before that each one of the blocks in this little graph that you see represents one stitch. So this particular pattern needs to have at least 17 stitches across and 17 rows high. So this is a 17 by 17 square. And as you can see, I wanted the design to be in the middle, so I wanted a few extra stitches along the side. Before you begin, you're going to want to train your eye to be able to form little blocks in your mind based on what you're seeing here. So what I like to do is look at the holes that you can see in the fabric itself. And I like to say, okay, well I'm going to pick this stitch here to start. This is going to be my top left corner. Then we're going to go down to the bottom right corner. Then we'll come back up to the top right corner. And we'll go back down to the bottom left corner. And you'll just want to maintain this same pattern throughout your design. It's important to note that however you start is how you should go through the entire project. You'll want to tackle whatever design you're working on row by row. So you're going to start in the bottom left corner and you're going to go all the way over to the edge, and then you'll go up and come back the other way, then go up and back. And you're just going to keep working in this particular fashion. So what I've done here is I have marked where I want to start. So grab your darning needle. I like to use my bigger darning needles for this because it's easier to hold on to. And I have about 2 to 3 feet of yarn here on my needle. I usually like to work in small groups like that. That way it doesn't get twisted and tangled as you're working your cross stitches. Now what we want to do is we want to come in from the back side, and I like to work my cross stitches from the top left corner. So I'm going to pull that all the way through and leave yourself a little bit on the inside so that you can tie it off. And from here I'm going to work into the bottom right corner. Now I've found that if you pull these a little bit tight as you're working the stitches, they do look a little bit neater, so it's something you can keep in mind. Now we're going to go to the top right corner there, and then finally down to the bottom left corner. And there we've made our first little cross stitch, and we're ready to take a peek at our diagram again so we can see that the next stitch is going to be blank. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stitches that are going to have the cross stitch pattern right in a row. So in order to skip a stitch, you may want to jump over a little too far, and this is actually what I did when I was practicing. I jumped over and basically started what looked to be the next stitch, but it actually leaves 2 gaps. So if you're doing 2 side by side, you're going to use the same hole or the same place where your corner is. So in order to make 1 gap or to skip 1 stitch, you're just going to jump over to that next hole right here. So again, we want to work in from the back, and so we have skipped that next stitch, and now we can work our 5 in a row. And I always use the same pattern for my cross, that way all of my stitches look the same. Okay, so we've got our next one there, and like I said before, when we do 2 in a row, we're going to come out the same hole that we did for the top right corner of that stitch right next to it. And when we do the final corner, we're going to go into the same corner that bottom right stitch was created, that bottom corner. Okay, and there we've got our 2 in a row. So we'll just keep moving right along. We'll go out that same hole where that top corner came from. And now just one last cross stitch. Okay, now if we look at our diagram again, we've worked until this stitch right here. So the next one we're going to skip, and then we're going to work 5 more in a row, skip 1, and work the last cross stitch. So we're not going to start in this hole again since we're skipping. We're going to start in this very next one here. Okay, now for this pattern we're going to skip another stitch, so we're going to start in this hole right here, and this is going to make the last cross stitch for this first row. Now we're going to work back up on the next row. We're going to talk just a little bit more about how we go from the row down at the bottom up to the next row. And especially for this pattern, it's a little bit strange. We need to go up to this row here, so we'll end up near this stitch, but our first stitch isn't actually until all the way over here. So basically what we're going to do is just carry the yarn from the bottom right corner here, and we're just going to carry it all the way up to this next stitch here. So in looking at our fabric, we're going to be using the holes right here and right here, here, and here, because again these stitches are going to be sitting right on top of each other, so we need to use the holes that we used for the top parts of these X's. So we just need to shift our focus up a little bit. This is the stitch that's right above this one, and then we have this stitch here, and we want to start in this stitch right here. So this corner is where we want to work. Now again, we need to come in from the back side, and we're just going to work our cross stitch as normal. So we've got our top one, we're using the same hole as we did for that stitch below it. Okay, so we've got that one made. We'll come back to our diagram. So we're going to skip 1, 2, 3 stitches and work into the fourth. So, and an easier way to look at it too is just visualizing the pattern. So we know this is going to be a heart, and we know that our next stitch is going to be over top of this last one right here. So that's another easy way of looking at it. We know we just want to come in directly above this stitch right here, and we're just going to carry the yarn over from that last stitch we did until this one here. Now one thing that's important to note about cross stitch is it is not reversible. So you want to make sure that whatever is on the other side of this is hidden or lined. So as you can see here, this finished section, you can see where I've carried all of my stitches, and where I've joined on yarn, I've just simply tied them on. That's an easy way of getting things done. Or you can weave in your ends as you do if you were crocheting. So with that, we're going to conclude this little discussion on cross stitching in crochet. Again, if you like this pattern that I'm working on here, you can find the diagram and the pattern for this crocheted piece at bhookedcrochet.com. I'll leave that link in the description below this video. Stay tuned for more free patterns and video tutorials from bhookedcrochet.com.